It's time for my next Patreon review. Today we're looking at Dog City. Dog City was an animated series animated by Canada's own Nelvana and created and produced by Jim Henson Productions. It aired for 3 seasons between 1992 and 1994. However, the show's origins go back to 1989 on The Jim Henson Hour, an often forgotten about primetime show starring the Muppets. The show was done in the same spirit as The Muppet Show, except instead of stage performances, it was about television programs. But it also had some other segments, like the critically acclaimed Storyteller and even some behind-the-scenes stuff. Dog City was originally featured in one episode as a TV movie that featured Rolf, as well as cameo appearances from other dog Muppets. Hey, it's Sprocket from Fraggle Rock! It's a comedy done in the style of a 1930s gangster film, which mostly consists of dog-related jokes and visual gags.
Quick, where's the nearest hydrant?
No time for that now. Can't you see we've got a fire to fight?
Though there were guns, and I mean lots of guns. Ah, the glory days of family entertainment. The whole thing was inspired by, and I'm not kidding, that famous painting of the dogs playing poker. And if you don't believe me, Jim Henson himself will tell you.
Did you ever see one of those old paintings of a bunch of dogs sitting around playing cards? Well, that inspired us to create a whole city of dogs based on the style of the gangster movies of the 30s and 40s.
Yup, Jim Henson, in his infinite imagination, created an entire world around that ridiculous concept. The man's creativity truly was too good for this world. And I guess the idea was liked well enough that they spun it off into its own show. Though a few changes were made, the most notable of which is instead of just being about gangsters, it was a 1930s detective show. Awesome, I love me a good noir detective story. Time to sit back, put on your fedora, and wait for some troublesome dame to come walking through your door. Aww. Well, anyway, here's Dog City. Management will hear of this. So our main character is Ace Hart, Dog City's #1 detective and always ready to take a bite out of crime. And we got that obvious reference out of the way. Helping him out is Eddie, the local paperboy who sometimes tags along with Ace. He also kinda looks like Fievel from An American Tail. There's also Rosie O'Gravy, Dog City's no-nonsense chief of detectives.
I want clues, I want pictures, I want prints. Get me prints! Hiya, Prince! Hello, boy. Get Dustin.
Okay, maybe there's a little bit of nonsense. And in case it wasn't obvious, she's also Ace's love interest.
See you around.
Not if I see you first.
Wolf, good comeback.
Hey, same to you and twice as much.
Oh, yeah? Well, I'm rubber and you're glue.
And?
I think you can fill in the rest.
Ah, jeez, you two, get a... doghouse? Together they help Ace take on some of Dog City's most ruthless criminals, like Bugsy.
Yeah. Who'd you expect, Doc? Warren Beatty?
No, Bugsy Vile, the most ruthless crime boss in all of Dog City. He's kinda like if Marlon Brando fused with Muttley from Hanna-Barbera.
That ought to teach him to keep his wet nose out of my business.
His team consists of your usual stereotypical henchmen. You know, the big dumb guy and the smaller wise guy type, and the crazy one. I do like that the crazy one will sometimes blurt out something intelligent.
Wasn't it Shakespeare who wrote, "Oh, what a tangled web we weave, when first we practice to deceive"?
Surprisingly, Bugsy's girlfriend is a cat. Yes, there are indeed cats in Dog City, and of course, they don't get along well with the dogs. In fact, it's established that some don't like their relationship. But despite that, they still stay together. Hey, they may be criminals, but they're progressive. There was also a secondary villain named Baron von Rottweiler, which sounds like the Dog City equivalent to Von Richter from Cyber 6. He wasn't seen as often as Bugsy, but I think he was a much more fun villain.
It saddens me to snuff out the life of such a worthy opponent, but I'll get over it.
But whichever villain is causing trouble, you better believe Ace Hart will be there to stop them. And I'm sure you've guessed the crimes are usually dog-themed. But they usually have some kind of creative twist to them. In the first episode, Bugsy steals all of Dog City's squeaky toys because one has a specific sound that'll open a safe. But without their squeaky toys, all the dogs go crazy.
Dogs will do crazy things when they're deprived of all things soft and chewy. I know. It's my business to know. I'm Ace Hart. Private Eye, dog.
Dog City's a tough town. They say you can turn a corner and find just about anything. Yuck. In another episode, the big guy in Bugsy's gang falls for some rich girl who's the daughter of a bigwig owner of a dog food company who, of course, doesn't like them seeing each other. But then Ace discovers something about the dog food he makes and uses it against him.
All right, Dane, you asked for it.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot!
It's cereal. Straight from the Dane Dog Food Factory. I wonder how many loyal customers you'll have left once they find out his master's choice contains filler.
You monster! The chair is too good for him! Though they weren't all dog-themed, sometimes there'd be some crazy one-shot villain like Screwy Louie. Some nutcase that compulsively removes the screws from everything he sees, causing most of the city to fall apart. I think whoever wrote this had a few screws loose. One of the more interesting episodes was the one where Bugsy runs for mayor and wins by cheating during the election. Wow, a crooked con man weaseling his way into a political position in a rigged election. Can you imagine that happening in real life? This episode shows off a darker side to Dog City because Bugsy revokes Ace and Rosie's dog licenses. Apparently in Dog City you need a license like dogs do in real life, and if you don't have one, you get executed. Jeez. At least put him up for adoption first. Though it doesn't last because Bugsy doesn't want to be mayor anymore, so he tries to do bad stuff in order to get kicked out. Okay, this is getting a little too real. Let's move on. I really like the show's sense of humor. Yeah, there were plenty of dog-related puns, but there were plenty of witty moments as well. And when they ran with a gag, they really ran with it.
It's a stakeout.
Have you assessed how many helpless orphan pups are in there?
Check. None. They're all out at the vets.
What's with these flies?
Been on this stakeout a long time. Check it out. The steaks have gone bad.
Here's our backup now.
Hey!
That's them. Best SWAT team on the force.
No flies on those guys.
Jeez, good thing I retired the punch gag. Ugh. It still hurts. There were even a few that I'm sure went right over the heads of the kids who originally watched this show.
Maybe it's time you switch to Pavlov brand beef biscuits. When you hear that sound, you know it's time to chow down on Pavlov brand beef biscuits.
And that's pretty much how Dog City is. Unfortunately, as the show went on, it got less good. It did last for 3 seasons, so I guess that's to be expected. Later episodes were more heavy on the comedy and even just general silliness. While the show did have plenty of comedy, it still carried itself like an actual detective show. But later on it started adding new characters, some of which were parodies of superheroes for some reason, and other characters I just found it hard to care about. I think the strangest addition was Rosie's niece, who kinda comes out of nowhere and only says, "Why?"
Here we are, Dot, at the World of Tomorrow exhibit. Why? So we can see all the wonderful things the future has to offer. Why? Push the yellow button on your belt, Dot. Why? Well, I'm impressed. Why?
More like, why are you here? And that's pretty much Dog City, but there's more to this show. I've only been showing you about half the story. Because remember, this is a Jim Henson production, and while it was made not long after he had died, the spirit of his creativity definitely lived on, because if anything could be said about Jim Henson, It's that he always went one step further.
Sit, Opie. Sit. We'll be right back. Shake, Opie. Shake. Now back to our show.
So, yeah, Dog City is actually a show within a show called Dog City. This segment was the part done by Jim Henson Production, and it used a lot of the puppets featured in the original Dog City special, and it had a lot of the same slapstick humor you'd expect with the Muppets. Most of the focus is on the show's creator, Elliot Shagg, and his struggles in creating each episode, which he produces entirely by himself, with but a swipe of his paintbrush. Wow. Hey animators, don't you wish it was that easy? This part of the show played out more like a sitcom, with Elliot trying to work on the show with something happening or someone coming into his apartment. And here we can see some of the inspiration for Dog City, as everyone around Elliot was a direct inspiration for a character in the show. Eddie was based on a young pup named Artie, who's Elliot's neighbor and a fan of his work. Bugsy was based on the building's superintendent Bruno, who's kind of a jerk, and Kitty was based on the building's landlord, Miss Fluffy. Which means Elliot basically shipped two people he knows in real life. He might be a bit of a weirdo. Speaking of which, Rosie is based off of another neighbor that he has a crush on named Colleen. Not to be confused with another dog named Colleen. Unfortunately, about halfway through the series, she moves away. Because of this, Elliot starts to lose inspiration for Rosie's character. However, Artie's mom, Terry, joins the show, who Elliot takes a liking to, and starts basing Rosie's character off of her. I have to admit, Terry was way more interesting than Colleen. She's a single mom who owns a demolition company, and watching Elliot try to impress her is kind of adorable. Man, he is such a dork trying to get the attention of a girl he likes. Not that I would know anything about that. And a lot of the situations he finds himself in were also direct inspirations for episodes. The one where Bugsy becomes mayor was based on when Miss Fluffy left Bruno in charge of the building and he ran things with an iron fist.
I am top dog. I am ruler of the building. See? People, you would have been born to Cinderella's by now. Once more, from the top. If I told you once, I told you twice. No closed doors. I am top dog. I am Mr.
I have gone mad with the insignificant amount of power I've been given, and yous are all my bitches now. The episode with Screwy Louie was based on when Elliot got upset over his drawing desk falling apart because of some loose screws. See, I told you he had some screws loose. I kind of like this because it shows how the creative process can help you overcome issues by channeling your problems into something. Some advice that I hear a lot is when you're writing, it's best to base things you're writing on and characters you create off of actual experiences you've had and people you've met. That way there's a level of sincerity to what you're creating, and overall it's just easier that way. What makes things really interesting though is that Elliot and Ace can actually directly communicate with each other, and often they give each other advice.
Could she be taller? Thinner? Prettier? Friendlier? Now this is a client.
Ace, we've done these mysterious and beautiful lady dogs so many times.
Sure, but not with this shade of lipstick.
This really makes the show interesting because I've heard that a lot of big creators can kind of do the same thing. I think when asked how he writes for Garfield, Jim Davis famously said something like, Garfield tells him what to do. Now, obviously he doesn't talk to Garfield. At least I don't think he does. But what it really means is that he understands the character and knows how he would react to certain situations. And Elliot certainly understands his work. There were even times when his boss tried to make weird changes to the show, like adding a crazy villain that went out of control. So what did Elliot do? He had Bugsy, the villain he made, show him up. Like a boss. But he's also not opposed to different ideas. Like when Elliot's old mentor shows up and they do a crossover episode with his own dog detective. They end up having some creative differences, but then Elliot realizes that the episode turned out really good. In later episodes, Elliot actually gave Artie his own segment on the show. It was kinda lame, to be honest, but in context, it feels like Elliot became the mentor for a future cartoonist. Though there is a good chance that I'm thinking way too much into this. I mean, there is the whole thing with Ace and Elliot, but not only can they talk with each other, they can physically interact as well. They even played a game of tennis in one episode.
Ace, could you give me some pointers?
Sure, kid, I'll serve.
Ready? Hey, you're good at this game.
How the hell does that work? Elliot even sees Ace in other places besides the drawing table. He even showed up in a video game. But I think one of my favorite moments was when Elliot fell asleep at the drawing table and actually showed up in the cartoon.
I can do everything cartoon characters do. I can zip out, zip in. I can do double takes. I can squash. I can stretch.
Whoa, careful, Elliot. You know what happens when a creator writes themselves into their story.
3 cheers for Elliot Shag. He's our hero. Arf, arf, arf.
Oh god, he's going full Mary Sue! There was also an episode where Elliot was babysitting, or dog-sitting rather, and the pup starts messing around with the cartoon world. He even rips the paper and Ace almost falls into some kind of abyss. What the hell, that's terrifying! Though where exactly would he have fallen to? The floor? No, it's impossible, Muppets don't use floors. One of the best moments was when Elliot got fired for standing up against the changes his boss wanted to the show. So he tries to make ends meet by doing commercials and other stuff he doesn't like just to keep the character of Ace Hart alive. He even tries to get Ace turned into a movie which an artsy director wanted to do weird things with, but he refused. But while he watches him struggle, Ace tells Elliot that it might be time to let go. Yes, Ace was willing to be let go for Elliot's sake.
Elliot, you gotta let me go.
I can't do it, Ace.
Keep that sense of humor, kid. It's gotten us through a lot.
I'm gonna miss you, Ace.
A creation willing to sacrifice itself for the well-being of its creator. If this was how the show ended, it could have been one of the most memorable series finales of all time. But no, this was just season 1. Elliot ends up getting his job back at the last minute.
The fans of Ace Hart are rabid. They're foaming at the mouth to get you back on the air.
Wow. Elliot better be grateful social media wasn't a thing yet. In the actual final episode, everyone in Elliot's building is going on vacation. He wants to join them because he hasn't had a vacation in a long time, but is having a hard time leaving the drawing board. But Ace encourages him to take a break and promises he'll be here when he gets back. Then all the cartoon characters gather round to play a game of cards, bringing everything full circle. This is another show I can tell people at least cared about since it got a nice send-off. Hey, at least it got a send-off. Most shows aren't so lucky. Though I am still wondering what the deal was with how Elliot and Ace can talk to each other. Was Ace just a voice in his head? Did he have some kind of magic power? Who knows? This might be a case of it being up to the viewer to decide what's really going on here. Okay, I think we're done here. Can I get rid of this thing now? Why? What's wrong with the hat? You know I don't normally wear a hat. What'd you give me this for anyway? Well, I thought the reviews were getting a bit stale lately, so I'm just trying out a few things to, spice things up a bit. Really? Your idea of spicing things up is to give me a hat? This is a lamer idea than Dave. Hey, don't you make fun of Dave. People liked him. Couldn't you have at least sent a troublesome dame through my door? You know we don't have any other actors. Unless you want to wear a dress. And I can make that happen. You know what? I think I'll just stick with the hat for now. Yeah, that's what I thought. Now hurry up and wrap this review up already. Ugh, fine. You know, nowadays being meta is very common, and while it certainly is nothing new, I really can't think of anything done on this level, which means Dog City is quite a unique show. Had the cartoon premiered on its own, it would have been okay. just a perfectly serviceable Saturday morning cartoon. But when combined with the Muppets segment, it becomes something a bit more. Not necessarily one of the best things I've seen, but it's certainly fascinating, and I dare say it's even a bit underrated. Like I said, I could be thinking too much into this, but I'd say if you're an aspiring animator or writer or some kind of content creator, you might want to check it out. There's a good chance you can get something out of it and maybe even find it a bit relatable. And so concludes my third Patreon review, and I think we're going to take a little break from the requests for now. As much as I've appreciated the donations, there are still a lot of things that I want to review, so we'll hold off on any requests for the time being. But if you are interested in supporting me and supporting the channel, consider checking out the Patreon. And join me next time for another cartoon review from the archive.
I don't care if he's rich, he'll be my ever-loving puppy. And I'll just be his.
Welcome to family programming, folks.